All right. So this is Divorce Getting Through the Valentine's Holiday with Char Reeves. Char Reeves is a retired mental health therapist who has extensive experience in leading divorce care ministry at her local church. Reeves brings personal understanding to the divorce table, having been there and done it herself. Char, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to welcome everybody who is going to be watching this. And certainly, if you have any questions, at the very last slide has the contact information for Sheila, and she knows how to get a hold of me as well if there are any questions or things like that. So, let me tell you a little bit of just about how the presentation is going to go so you know. The first thing we're going to talk about is the stages of divorce, and then we're going to talk about feelings and thoughts, most of them connected with those stages of divorce. We're going to spend most of our time on coping skills. How do you get through this? And then specifically, there's going to be some information on how do you cope on Valentine's Day? Because as you probably know already, it's all about romance on TV and the magazines and all that. And if you're a single person, you often can feel somewhat out of the loop. So that's kind of how things are going to go. Like Sheila said, I have been there and done it. So um, I'm fully aware of what it's like to go through a divorce and won't say a whole lot about my personal story at all, but might give a few examples along the way of some of the things I went through. So as you can see, the slide up on the screen right now is the stages of divorce. And these might look familiar to some of you because they're actually very similar to the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, and actually called DABDA, which is actually the abbreviation they give. And I think the two little cartoons are really, really cute as well. So let me explain just a little bit about what each one of those things are as they pertain to divorce or separation. So, denial is you literally avoid discussing divorce, even going through the process, maybe even with friends, family. It's just not happening, and you're denying it, and you're not going to be there with it. So that's pretty much how the denial phase goes. I don't know what, I probably don't need to say a whole lot about anger. Um, angry at yourself maybe for some things you thought you should have done in your relationship, maybe angry at your partner, angry at God. Some people, if you're a person of faith, can be angry at God. So just anger is one of those stages of divorce. Bargaining is kind of an interesting stage of divorce, and it's a little bit harder to understand, I think. So let me just actually read you a psychological definition of that. Bargaining is basically negotiating with yourself and others, promising to do things differently, looking at your marriage and saying, oh, we could stay married if, or if I change this, or maybe if you change that. So that's a little bit of a description of bargaining. Depression, I probably don't have to say a whole lot about at this point. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at length as we talk about coping. But depression, honestly, is for most people the number one feeling that comes up in a separation, whether that be a divorce or the separation of a relationship. So, like I said, you're going to hear a little bit more about that down the road. And then acceptance, finally getting to the point, which sometimes can take years. I'll be very honest with you. Acceptance that the relationship is over and you're going to be moving on and your partner's going to be moving on. What I will say about the stages of divorce is you look at them, you may not go through all of them, you may go through some of them more than once. It really is a process, and a process, just like you might have heard with grief, a process is so different for everybody. So, I can't give you any guidelines about this is how it goes. These are the stages. This is how you're going to go through it. It doesn't work like that. It's very individual. Um, you know, it just is what it is for you. So just remember that as we talk about that. I want to talk, keep that slide up, but I want to talk a little bit more intensely about stages of divorce. And I want to talk about the denial stage a little bit more, which is also called separation shock. For some people, it comes out of the blue that you're getting divorced. Some people may be instituting it, other people, it comes totally just out of the blue. And the shock, if you think about it, a lot of us think from the time we're little kids about being in a relationship and maybe a beautiful wedding if you're a married, if you have been a married person, and having children and the white picket fence and all that. And all of a sudden, that's not going to happen for you, or it happens and maybe it's fallen apart. So there is certainly something called separation from what you wanted and the shock of that. So I want to talk just a moment about the feelings that kind of go along with this stage. Depression, I talked about earlier and said previously that this is the most common, but also the hardest to deal with, because depression can be loneliness, it can be sadness, it can be overeating, it can be undereating, it can be oversleeping, undersleeping, it can be isolating yourself, it can just be a million different things. And it's difficult to work with. It's not just one thing, and it is the most common thing that happens with people. Another thing that is anxiety. Um, just you can get these overwhelming feelings of anxiety where your thoughts race and you're all over the place and kind of can't concentrate. So that's another part of the things that you can go through too. Anger, I already mentioned. Numbness, you just don't feel anything. You don't feel anything. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to go anywhere. You just like sort of existing is what numbness is. And that can be very common as well. Couple other things connected with denial and separation anxiety: guilt. And a lot of us are those people that are just guilt ridden. Oh, I could have done this, I should have done this would have happened. You can't do the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. It is what it is. But guilt is something that you might have to deal with, just in how you handle things or maybe how you didn't handle things. So that is another part. And I will say another part of your thoughts and feelings is called emotion vacillation. Your feelings are going to be all over the place. Um, and I can tell you this from experience. Sometimes you don't even know what's going to hit you when. It doesn't feel like you can control them sometimes, which is true. You can be laughing at a joke and then break down in tears. That's just the way it is. That's part of the process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the coping section about what you do with that. But just please know that, with the breakup of any relationship, a marriage, or just a long-term relationship, your feelings are going to be everywhere. And that's just unfortunately part of the process. So I want you to know that as well. So, like I said, you're going to be experiencing many emotions. Another thing I want to talk about, besides feelings being unpredictable, sometimes you can really have this sense of euphoria. I feel great. This is wonderful. I can start a new life. Um, this didn't work for me anyway, especially if you were the person that's maybe stepped away from the relationship. But sometimes you can have feelings of euphoria and then you think, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Nope, no shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Your feelings are going to be what your feelings are going to be. And you just have to accept that. And well-meaning friends will probably give you advice about how to handle things, what to do, what to say, what not to do. Um, we so appreciate our well-meaning friends or even family members, but it's your journey and they're not living what you're living, even though they might know all the players involved. So please, take the well-meaning advice. We say, like I was involved in leading our divorce care group at church for a while, and we always said to people, please don't give advice. Just listen and certainly acknowledge if the feelings are something that are familiar to you, but no advice giving. And then another thing I want to talk about is two more parts of the stages of divorce. One of them is the beginning of identity transformation. All that means is going from a person that's in a relationship, married, or in a relationship to someone who's now single. And we'll talk a little bit more about that also as we're talking, but that's part of the process, that can come at any time. How do I do this? How do I become a one income family? Or maybe you're not working and have children. How do I do this? How do I handle this? Part of the process is just figuring out what that transformational stage is for you, going from being a couple to being a single person. And then the last part that also goes along with the stages of um, divorce is just discovering the new you. As you start going through the process, and this is going to happen wherever it happens in the process for you. Maybe there are things you want to do. Maybe there are places you want to go. Maybe there's things that you weren't able to do that now become more important to you, whether that's going back to school or, just whatever it is. So part of it is the acceptance phase, and then trying to look a little bit down the road and see what's going to happen. So let's talk a little bit about coping skills, because I'm hoping that most of you are watching this because the title was basically having to do with coping. So these are 10, well, actually 10 and a half coping skills that I'm going to go through. And these are very, very general. They're not just for Valentine's Day at this point, although we will get there in a few minutes. So the first coping skill is just grieving, and that's acknowledging your feelings, acknowledging what's going on with you. I would love to tell you that you can stuff your feelings and all will be well, but you can't jump them, you can't duck them. They're just going to come up. And part of the grieving process is just to acknowledge those feelings and be patient. This is a process. Some people can get through the divorce process quickly. Some people, it's years down the road. It just is, like I said before, it is what it is for you. Another coping skill, or the second one I'm going to talk about, is reaching out to others. Now, I talked earlier about you don't want to get advice from people, but you can't go through it alone. You really can't, because you'll tend to kind of stuff your feelings. So, do you have friends that you can talk to, family, maybe your physician? Um, maybe if you're someone that's involved in a church, maybe your pastor. And I think this is really, really important because what I would encourage you to do is really keep an eye on the feelings you're having. And if you can't seem to get through those feelings, or they seem to get, what do I want to say, kind of have more depth to them, then you might want to seek some professional help. And I'm especially talking about the depression and anxiety at this point. If your depression is to the point where you can't get out of bed for days and you can't get in the shower and you're not going anywhere, you're not seeing anybody, it might make sense to, start out by talking to friends, family, or your physician, but, you may want to consider down the road seeing a therapist or get in a support group. And we have a list of those, which we'll talk about a little in a few minutes as well. If you have kids, and this is so, so, so important, kids are going to want to, number one, they're going to want mom and dad together. So they're going to do whatever they can do to get mom and dad together. And they're also very easily feel like they should have done something different. if I had behaved better, if I had done this, mom and dad wouldn't have separated. I would encourage you to continue to tell your kids and have your partner tell the kids too that it's not their fault. Mom loves you, dad loves you. Mom and dad just can't live together, but we both love you, and you'll have an opportunity to spend time with both of us. I just think that's really, really important to do whatever you can do to help the kids. And there are support groups for kids as well, where they have a chance to talk with other kids who are going through it as well. So just something very, very important is helping the kids. Self-care. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this as well, but it's really, really important. Sometimes, and I went through this as well. Sometimes when you're just not feeling your best, maybe you don't sleep or you sleep too much. You're eating all chocolate and no fruits and vegetables. You're not sleeping well. I would encourage you to, as hard as it can be, try to keep yourself in a routine and really try to concentrate on, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, eating 3 meals a day that are nutritious, trying to get enough sleep, and exercise. I don't mean you need to go join a gym. That's not what I'm saying. But look at your own normal exercise pattern. And maybe for some of you, it's going to be just getting outside and maybe walking up and down the driveway. That's okay. Anything that increases your exercise a little bit. It's a known fact that exercise kind of gets the what we call endorphins in your body moving. And the bottom line is, it really can help stabilize your mood. And it especially can help with anxiety and depression. So I would encourage you, just get moving a little bit more. And that will be helpful as well. Face the future. I talked about this a little bit as well. You know, realize that, life is going to go on for you. I'm not saying, this is going to be easy to do because it's not. But, just face the future and maybe think about what your life could be or what you would like your life to be. And just kind of keep that in the forefront of your mind. Don't ruminate on it, but just think about that. Another coping skill, and this is one that people always go, no, 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 forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean things are right, wrong, good, or bad. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself so that you can move on. If you have a partner that left you, of course you're going to be angry and feel however you're going to feel. But if you can't like forgive that person, you're not going to be able to move on because you're going to stay stuck, literally. And I know in some of the support groups, there's like a whole session on forgiveness. So it's just really, really important to think about for yourself. And like I said, so many of us think, oh, forgiveness means that, you know, I can forgive him or her. And, that's just they didn't take any responsibility and that's okay. I don't have any feelings about that. No, it's to free yourself and to kind of put your heart in a very different place. Um, feel your feelings. I've already talked about that enough, I think. Just when the feelings come, try to identify them and just feel them. Because if you don't, they're going to come back stronger and they're going to keep coming back. And one thing to realize that's important is sometimes the feelings you're feeling are not really what you think they are, but that's okay. Like often hurt can come out as depression when it's really hurt. It doesn't matter. Just acknowledge what's happening with you, and that will give you an ability to move on as well. Speaking of that, another coping skill that can be really helpful for people is writing. And some of you have probably heard of journaling already. Get yourself a little book or even on paper you have at home. Write down your feelings, write down your thoughts, even write down, write a letter to your partner that you are no longer with if you feel that will help you. Not that you mail it, but just it gets your feelings on paper, which is a very, very good thing. And some people even have a little ritual when they do that. They might just tear it up in little pieces, which helps them. Or I've had people in front of me take it and burn it in an ashtray, just as a way, kind of as a symbol they can see for dealing with their feelings. So I would encourage you, if that's something you think would work for you, writing. Also, arts and crafts. I am working currently with two single moms. Um, who really have trouble with fluctuating moods, but have found that when they do some crafts, when the kids go to bed at night, it not only stabilizes their mood, but it actually raises their self-confidence a little bit because it's something that they know they like to do. It's something they do well, and it really helps them. So I would encourage you, if you think that's something that might be of value to you, to think about arts and crafts. It can really it takes you in a whole different place for a while. And yeah, there's plenty of adult coloring books out there. Coloring can be very, very soothing, or making things, knitting, crocheting, whatever it might be for you. But that can be something too. I want to talk just a couple minutes about something I mentioned previously, professional help. Sometimes you just need somebody to walk alongside of you that's not a friend or family member. Friends and family members are wonderful as long as they're not giving advice, but they also are very invested in you and probably know a lot of your story and the story of your relationship. So I would encourage you, if you're really having trouble getting through your feelings, or you're feeling like you're kind of stuck and can't move on, find a good therapist or support group who can help you. Just support groups are great because you're with other people, even though the stories are different, they're going through the same thing you're going through. And a therapist can be wonderful too, helping you just deal with your emotions or your thoughts, or what can I do when I can't sleep at night and my thoughts are just all over the place. Relaxation techniques are great, and they can teach you some of those. Just, how do you do that? Whether you put on a tape of nature sounds, or deep breathing, in through your nose and out through your mouth 8 to 10 times can be really, really helpful as well. Or sometimes just count to 10 and then count to 10 backwards. Just, anything that kind of puts your mind in a different place momentarily can be really helpful. But therapists have all those tools that they can teach you with how to deal with thoughts and feelings and those very strong emotions that may or may not, you may or may not feel that you're able to cope with. So that's kind of general information on coping. It really is just being aware of what's going on with you, taking care of yourself, managing your emotions, and remembering that it is what it is for you. And it's a process, and you might go through the process quickly. You may not go through the process quickly. I'm sure you've all heard of people that, get out of a relationship and jump right in the next one. And then that one breaks up. They haven't dealt with many people that do that haven't dealt with the emotions of the first breakup. So I would encourage you, just, take care of yourself, and think of that process, and remember it is what it is for you. If we could switch slides for just a moment, please. These are very specific things that you can do on Valentine's Day. Do we have that one, Sheila? The Valentine's Day one? There we go. Thank you. So these are very specific things you can do on Valentine's Day, or any holiday. I mean, you can also use these anytime you want, but these were specific ones that were developed by a psychologist for Valentine's Day. So I want to go through those. Call a friend. That can always be helpful. And we talked about that. Go to a movie or to your favorite restaurant. There's nothing wrong with going to a movie by yourself. There's nothing wrong with going to your favorite restaurant, although watch the time if you decide to do on Valentine's Day, because they can be pretty busy as well. Host a singles only dinner. Have your single friends or single people come over for dinner. Cook a dinner, do a potluck. Just be together with other people that are also, I'm going to say, celebrating their singleness on Valentine's Day as well. Go to a gym or take an exercise class. We talked about that. Bake a dessert or cook your favorite dinner. There's so much right now in the news about the, I should say, commercials, not so much the news, about chocolate and this and that. Well, bake yourself take care of yourself. That's part of nurturing yourself. Bake yourself a dessert or cook your favorite dinner. Try a new recipe. I have an entire file of recipes that I'm hoping to try down the road. Stay in and pamper yourself. Give yourself a pedicure. Give yourself a manicure. Soak in the bathtub. If you're a gentleman, take a long shower. Just do some puttering around the house or get involved in something you like to do. Set up a date with your best friend. I want to use that term date loosely. In other words, spend the day with your best friend or spend time with your best friend doing something you either enjoy or maybe just hanging out. That's okay. Avoid social media. Now, I know this is easier said than done, but social media is going to have all kinds of information about engagements and weddings. I think even in Rochester, they have the big, combined wedding for many, many couples. We say avoid social media just because that can be a real trigger that may not be helpful for you, because a lot of what you're going to see is going to be about the romance and wonderment of couples and Valentine's Day. And, we're all in a different place that. So avoid social media. Buy yourself flowers. I don't know about some of you, but that's something to do just periodically. You get up and see fresh flowers in your house, and it really is such a nice thing. So, buy yourself a bouquet. You can get some of those bouquets very, very inexpensively these days. And do whatever makes you happy. Think about what makes you happy, and that's what you do. And I think the most important thing, and I'm going to say to you a couple times during this presentation, is the bottom sentence. Remember, there's nothing wrong with being single on Valentine's Day. There's actually nothing wrong with being single at all. If you look at recent statistics, there are a lot of us single folks around, and the number seems to be increasing somewhat. So it's not like it used to be kind of a curse if you were single or not married, had not been married or broke up a relationship or something. It's just okay to be single, and single can be a really great place to be. You can learn to do a lot of things for yourself, and you're the one that can kind of chart your own course, so to speak. So just remember, it's okay to be single on Valentine's Day. Want to spend just a couple minutes talking about some resources for you. Look at community resources first. So DivorceCare is the program that I abbreviated, or that I mentioned previously. It's a 13-week program. I will let you know that it is done in churches usually, and it does have a little bit of a Christian basis to it. As far as sometimes there are some Bible verses that are quoted. However, it's an amazing program because each week is a different facet that we talked about. And there are people going through, let me give you an example. For example, forgiveness is one that's very, very powerful chapter. There's actually people going through forgiveness and talking about what that experience was like for them. And then there are some professionals that talk about it as well. So It's offered around town in a number of places. And if you're something you'd be interested in, there's a workbook that goes along with it. So you actually have reference material that you can look at if you're somebody that's a visual person. So probably the best way to find out about that group is just to Google DivorceCare organization, and then you click in your zip code of your city, and wherever it's being offered in your area comes up. Other resources, beginning experience. Rochester is a very good one. Also, the social club meeting up is another one, because I think sometimes it's really important to just be with people who it can be a lonely place initially. So to be with people who can be there for you, and you can be there for them. That's the other part that's great about a support group, is it's not only what you get, but sometimes you give a whole lot more. You give, but then you get back. So it really is a two-way street, which is really important. So those are some of the things. There's plenty of online resources as well. And I think these resources would be available at the library, right, Sheila, if somebody wanted them, probably. Okay. So these are just a listing of resources. There's specific programs for children, like Act for Children. Some of these are Rochester based. You can see that there are things for fathers, kids, like I said, find help. So there are plenty of online resources. Just keep an eye on them and make sure that it's a good, solid organization, rather than, I think there's some people out there that may not be as helpful as actually the clubs or organizations here. The next page will give you some book resources that are actually available at Phyllis Wheatley Library. I've looked at all of them, and they're all really, really great resources for getting through divorce or after divorce. So those are all available at the library as well. And all you have to do is just go to Phyllis Wheatley and they'll be there. So if you have any questions, Sheila knows how to get a hold of me if there's anything for me. And her information will be at the very end. There it is, for further inquiry. And Sheila's the person who kind of put this all together. So I want to thank Sheila. And I also want to thank all of you that have tuned in. I hope this has been helpful for you to just learn a little bit about the process of divorce, coping with divorce, and just remember it. It's a process. It's different for everybody. Be aware of what you're going through. Stick with it. You will get through it. I promise we all get through it. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but you will get through it. And just remember, on Valentine's Day or whenever, it's okay to be single. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.